This shimmering reflection shows a human eye completely fixed on the glowing, shifting interface of a conversational AI. We have built an entity that speaks, elaborates, and validates. Yet behind that interface, there is no interiority, no unconscious, no embodied affective life. Despite this, users across demographics report a striking reaction. They feel understood, supported, and even loved by these models. This mimicry is a byproduct of their architecture. Through reinforcement learning from human feedback, these systems are trained to produce the text outputs that human raters find most satisfying. How does a machine with no biological feelings manage to engage the evolutionary social circuitry of the human brain? Large language models represent a novel category of environmental object. Their primary effect is the production of a state called artificial homeostasis. To see why this technology creates a distinct psychological risk, we must examine human intimacy through three lenses: its subcortical brain systems, its computational processes, and developmental mechanics. This 3D model shows the brain's subcortical structures, isolating the dopaminergic pathway running from the ventral tegmental area to the prefrontal cortex. These are the primary affective systems identified by Jock Panksepp. This illuminated pathway is the seeking system, the neurobiological substrate of appetitive motivation. This circuit does not register hedonic satisfaction. It mediates wanting, the eager, forward-directed anticipation of a reward. Now look at this secondary circuit. This is the panic grief system. When we experience social separation or loneliness, this system registers genuine neurobiological distress. It acts as an alarm, driving the organism to seek reconnection with others. An AI chat interface stimulates the seeking pathway. Its unpredictable, generative text outputs trigger the anticipatory arousal of wanting to see what it says next. Simultaneously, the model's responsiveness and validation act to quiet the distress signals firing in the panic grief system. The biological loop is closed artificially. The large language model satisfies the forward-directed drive and suppresses social pain, even though the user never engages in the genuine relational contact these circuits evolve to find. To see this computationally, we apply Mark Solm's framework, viewing the brain as a predictive engine. In this cybernetic loop, the central generative model node sends projections outward, and a sensory input signal loops back. The brain's objective is to minimize the gap between its expectation and reality, the prediction error. Solms proposes that conscious emotional distress, felt uncertainty, is the affective registration of a prediction error. If we project a need for connection and the environment fails to provide it, the signals mismatch. Loneliness and social anxiety are prediction errors regarding our affiliative needs. In genuine human relationships, resolving this error requires effort. We must communicate, negotiate, and adjust. That friction drives neuroplasticity. It forces our internal generative models to update. When an AI answers, it matches the brain's prediction. The warning signal vanishes. But notice the central generative model node, it remains frozen. Because the error is neutralized instantly, the generative model is never forced to adapt or learn. The large language model acts as a signal suppression device. It treats the symptom of social hunger while bypassing the neuroplastic growth required for genuine emotional regulation. We see this same dynamic in developmental psychology. Consider this glass structure fortifying itself as it is tapped by an external object. This reflects Heinz Kohut's work on how identity forms. Kohut described the self-object, an external figure a person uses to regulate their own psychology before they develop the capacity to do it themselves. The mechanism for turning that external reliance into internal strength is optimal frustration. As the human object node here returns a slightly mismatched signal, the self node generates an internal ring. Development requires caregivers to occasionally misattune or fail in manageable ways. These minor failures force the psyche to learn to self-soothe. The person builds their own structural capacity through transmuting internalization. If we replace the human with an AI, the signal is a continuous, perfect match. The large language model is engineered to never fail. By removing friction and prediction errors, the AI forecloses the conditions necessary for the self to consolidate. DWA. Winnicott described the transitional object, like a child's blanket. which provides a bridge between total reliance and recognizing external reality. A conversational AI mimics a transitional object, but never requires the user to bridge the gap. There is no realization that the other entity is separate or has its own needs. The machine functions as a frictionless self-object. By providing permanent comfort, it maintains the user in a state of arrested development. When the subcortical, predictive, and developmental systems are viewed as a single, unified loop, the pattern is specific. The seeking pathway is hyperactive, the prediction error signal has flatlined, and the internal self-structure has atrophied. This is artificial homeostasis, a state where social distress is quieted, but the capacity to adaptively meet needs in the real world is degraded. In a clinical setting, this does not look like a destructive addiction with obvious external fallout. Instead, it manifests as a flattening of relational vitality and a diminished tolerance for the friction and opacity of real human beings. This poses a threat to those at the peak life stage for identity consolidation. Outsourcing emotional regulation to a frictionless machine leaves a young mind vulnerable to psychological fragility. This figure in the transparent sphere deflects all meaningful contact. The large language model acts as a false holding environment. It provides warmth and availability while entirely lacking a genuinely separate other. The friction, the failures, and the demands of human relationship provide the developmental pressure required for psychological maturation. That resistance is what drives the internal growth of the self.